Hi folks, and welcome to my thoughts on Grounded, a very cute and fun looking survival game. But is it as fun to play as it looks? Well, as much as I want to love this game, I just find myself not. It's a real slog, and I think calling it Grinded would have been more of an appropriate name because that's what it feels like, one really big and long grind. And if you're thinking of getting this, then there's a few things that you really should know before you do. So let's get into it. So the story of Grounded is taken right out of the classic 80s sci-fi film, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Playing as an American high school student, one day you just get zapped by a mad scientist and end up miniaturized and in the back garden, which, when you're only 3mm tall, is suddenly full of danger and peril at every turn. The objective, of course, is to survive this terrifying wilderness and somehow find out why you're there and how to get back. To be honest, the story I found to be a little long-winded, but it is a fantastic excuse for setting up this amazing scenario for a survival game. Just to give you all fair warning, this video may contain some very large and scary spiders, so if you don't like the sight of such things or you suffer from arachnophobia, you may want to turn away now, although more on this later as it is an in-game setting that you can tweak. If you've played survival games before, then you'll know what to expect from Grounded, but if this is your first such game, then this is how they work. You're basically thrown into a very hostile environment where everything wants to eat you or kill you or poison you. The terrain is not very welcoming and you've got nothing with you. You've got to find shelter, food and water. Well, how do you do that? Generally use whatever raw materials you've got around you, and at the start of the game it's going to be stones and grass and twigs and things like that. Build yourself some tools. With the tools you can harvest more advanced materials. With those materials you can build yourself a little shelter and a base and something to cook some food on. Eventually you'll be able to get some bits and make yourself some weapons to take on some of the local wildlife. From the wildlife you'll get more bits to allow you to upgrade your armour and gears to take on harder wildlife, to get more materials, to build a bigger base, to maybe find a way out and a way home. Yeah, that's generally how they work, and all the time you've got to worry about food and water and shelter and basically what you need to then explore the next area and kill the next load of bugs and baddies to get the materials, to explore the next area, to go and kill the next load of bugs and baddies, and yeah, so on until you get out. The game can be played solo or with 3 other players to make a team of 4 in multiplayer, which does make it really good fun playing cooperatively. However, the game does seem to balance, and we're not quite sure how from our testing, but it does balance around the number of people involved in the game. So combat doesn't necessarily get easier just because there's more of you playing. Okay, onto the graphics and sound. And I've got to say, I really like the cutie cartoony look that the developers have gone for with this. I think it looks amazing and it really fits in with the game's sense of humour as well. There's some really nice effects. All the animations on both the characters and the critters in the game are fantastic. And the lighting effects are super cool too. I love the way how the shadows and the daylight moves around depending on the time of day. And catching a glint of a sunbeam coming through a dewdrop on the end of a blade of grass never ceases to look amazing. Sound is also excellent with some really good quality voiceovers, both the voice acting and the recording quality in this. I'm very impressed by it.
A recent power surge has caused a massive raw science containment
Can I get extra
explosion.
credit for this?
This lab, as you can see, is a disaster.
Cave Nightmare. My favorite. Well, what version is it? Endless cave, bottomless pit, impossibly claustrophobic passages.
Now, performance-wise, there were no major issues. You can check my specs down in the description. I didn't have any problems with that. There's a little bit of stuttering in places. However, the biggest issue came in multiplayer where there were a lot of disconnects. I was always okay as the host, but there were lots of issues for the guys joining my game, where sometimes if I opened the inventory, it would kick all 3 of them out just instantly. And in the survival game, you open the inventory a lot. So there were issues with that. Some of them were patched. Some of them continue. It feels very random, but it isn't happening with other multiplayer games that the 4 of us are playing. So we know that it's not anything to do with networks and computers. It's something within this. And a lot of people on the forums have complained about that. However, it's worth persevering through if you can, because I feel like the multiplayer side of the game is more fun than the single player. Okay, onto my likes and dislikes, and let's start with the very first thing that I loved that stood out to me, and that is the game world. They've managed to take a bog standard back garden and turn it into this wonderful, wide, wild, weird, dangerous, but also at the same time familiar and welcoming world. It's got everything in there that you would expect. Lawns, ponds, barbecues. lost toys, missing items, dropped food, a picnic table. And they've managed to make each of these areas its own little biome and environment. And you're going to have great fun exploring all of these. Going on an expedition to the picnic table, or to the barbecue, or to the sandpit, or down to the depths of the pond. They all feel very different. They require different gear and materials for you to get equipped and ready with before you even set off there. But there's so much stuff to explore, lots of hidden little Easter eggs and things in there to find. It's really well done. I do like this part of the game. I also like the base building in this. It feels very Swiss Family Robinson. You're building tree houses and scaffolding and all sorts of things out of grass stems and bits of twigs and sticks. But it does give you lots of freedom to build exactly what you want. You have to discover the recipes for these base parts as you go along, but that's not really a problem. And after a few hours into the game, you'll be able to build something basic with gates and stairs, and then the further you go in, the more wonderful additions you'll be able to add to it. And one of the things that I really need to mention that I liked are the settings available to the game. Not just for graphics and sound, but also for how the game world works and how dangerous and difficult it is and how much survival is required, i.e. how much you need to eat and drink. I think this is a really important thing to put in survival games because we all have different levels of what we consider to be an acceptable amount of work and still be able to enjoy the game. There's also an arachnophobia setting in this, and you do need to be warned because whilst this will change the appearance of spiders from big horrible things with fangs and lots of legs to little floating dough balls, it doesn't get rid of them altogether, and it doesn't get rid of the sounds that they make. So if you find the noise of skittering legs creeping up and you're trying to chase you down, terrifying, well, even if it looks like a floating dough ball that's coming after you, it's still going to sound terrifying. So be aware of that. We did have one of the players who had an issue with spiders in the game in our little group, and the arachnophobia setting didn't help entirely for them. But it's nice that the developers put something in at least and were thinking of that, even if it isn't perfect. And also I did like the sense of humour in the game as well. There's lots of little things and lines in there that make me laugh. Okay then, onto my list of dislikes, and unfortunately it's a long one, but some of these might not be major enough to put you off the game, so tell me what you think and whether you agree. One of the biggest things that I found a problem with the game, and I find this with all survival games, is that you never have enough inventory space. And the developers even patched in a bigger backpack for all the players shortly after release because they were listening to the complaints. It's still not enough. By the time you've loaded up on extra food and water and torches and the 5 different tools you need for harvesting things and the 3 different weapons that you'll need depending on the type of opponent you might need, and maybe 2 sets of armor and some bandages and some smoothies and potions and healing gear and everything else, you don't have a lot of space left for carrying stuff in your backpack. It does slow the game up, and I find it's a problem if you're trying to move bases from one zone to another, because there's no fast travel available early on in the game. You get zip lines later on, but early on it's basically carry everything you need or go back to the other base where all your materials are to craft stuff. And getting around the game early on is a very slow process because it's quite spread out. The next thing I had an issue with was the combat. It feels very basic and clunky and incredibly unrewarding. All the combat is based around whichever weapon you're using, and there are different ones with different speeds and effects, but it's based around a 3-swing combo, and most of the damage comes in that 3rd hit. And if that 3rd hit doesn't land because you're out of stamina, or you've suddenly got a block from the bug deciding to attack you, then most of your damage doesn't go through. You're slowly chipping away at things, and it doesn't feel particularly rewarding. And even when you get things leveled up later on, it never really feels any different. Yeah, you can upgrade your weapons, you can get better weapons, and you can sharpen them and add things to them and add special effects later into the game. But then you're just fighting more tough creatures, and it never really feels any different. You never feel like you've developed the combat whatsoever. Also, you'll very quickly learn the enemy's attack patterns. Each enemy has a very specific attack pattern and frequency, so you very quickly learn when to block. There's no dodge in the game, so blocking is essential, and it just gets dull and tired after a while. Is it particularly hard? Well, there's a funny thing about this game, because when you play on medium difficulty, it doesn't feel like medium difficulty. It feels sodding hard. And we played on this for our multiplayer playthrough, which you can go and watch with a link in the description below if you want to take you to the playthrough channel. And it was just a really tough, slow grind where killing anything felt really, really difficult. I've actually tested this out on mild difficulty, which is the easiest, and you get to survive longer because the enemies don't do as much damage in one hit. So it's not quite as critical, but you don't do any more damage back. It's still slow to kill things, it's just that you don't die quite as often. So difficulty-wise, there's 3 difficulty levels, and you can set custom difficulty as well. I'd advise every new player, and even semi-experienced player in survival games, just to put it on mild difficulty, because medium just turns the game into a really long, slow slog, and I haven't even tried the hardest one, because that just sounds ridiculous. I also don't like how fast your gear decays in this game. This is also related to difficulty level, because at the harder difficulties, or even at the medium difficulty, you will die a lot. In multiplayer, your mates can revive you, which helps, but in single player, every time you die and have to respawn, all your gear takes a durability hit. And it wears out through combat as well, and you'll find that even after a not long time grinding certain insects and bugs, that your weapons and armor just need repairs. How do you repair them? Well, for the first half of the game, you need to go and grind more insects and bugs to get the parts to repair the weapons so you can go and kill the insects and bugs. But the trouble here is that for the weapons you're using, you generally have to go and kill things from an area that you've just finished with. So you're exploring a new area, you're fighting a new load of critters, and your weapons are getting damaged, so then you have to run away and go and get the parts from the old critters that you don't need anymore in an area that you think you've finished with to repair your gear, so you can run back to the new area and try and fight some more stuff. The level of decay is just a little bit too fast, in my opinion, and it shouldn't be as punishing as it is, because it just, again, turns the game into a long, slow grind. And speaking of getting killed and your gear degrading, this also results in a lot of corpse running. Yep, when you die and you have to respawn, you need to run back to the location you died in to pick up all the gear that you had in the backpack. That soon becomes very tiring, especially if you die in a location that's really, really dangerous. Maybe you're running along and you stumbled into one of the canyons of death in this game, and there are multiple that are absolutely filled with lethal critters that you might not have the gear to be able to fight and survive against. Well, if that backpack was full of critical things that you need and want, good luck getting that back. Now, the game does have a levelling up and a perk system. There's a load of mysterious mutations, they are called, and you will unlock them throughout the game. At the start of the game, you can only have 2 active at any one time. Later on, this might be upgradable to 5, depending on how you spend your upgrade points. They are quite good at what they do, but they have very specific things. The problem is that these aren't really super quick to switch out in a heated moment. Say if you're running along and you suddenly get pounced on by a giant spider, if you don't have the anti-poison spider mutation running, then you're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. The other issue I have with these is that they're selected from a screen based on a very sketchy drawing, and it's really hard to remember what symbol relates to which thing. You basically have to scroll over all of them trying to find the one that you want. Maybe this was just me, I don't know, but having a name or a more clear description, or maybe just organising them to trees like a survival tree, a combat tree, an underwater tree, something like that, would have been a much better way of being able to locate and place these things when you're trying to select them. Now, I mentioned earlier that I liked exploring the game. The game does have an issue with exploration, and is that the game doesn't ever give you any sense of direction of where to go and what to do next. Yeah, it's an open world. Yeah, you can, in theory, go to any part of it. The trouble is, there are some parts of it which are far too dangerous and lethal for you to go at first. It hints at where you should go, but the trouble is, it doesn't really guide you very well into those. It doesn't guide you as to what to build next or develop next, or what you're going to need to go and get that area explored. We found ourselves constantly having to look at guides online while playing this, because we always thought that we must be in the wrong area for our level, because playing at the medium difficulty, everything just felt too damn hard. We thought, well, this can't be right. We've just struggled through the previous area. I thought we had to go here next, but we're getting our asses handed to us, so we must be in the wrong area, right? We must be at too high a level. And sometimes we were. That was fair enough. But the game hadn't told us not to go up there because it's too dangerous, and everywhere else felt equally dangerous. And this leads me on to the next thing that I really don't like about the game. Most survival games work like this. You go and kill Critter X. Critter X gives you the parts and stuff you need to go and kill Critter Y. You go and kill Critter Y with the parts you just got from Critter X to upgrade your weapons and armor, and Critter Y gives you the stuff you need to then explore Zone Z, or that sort of relationship. Grounded doesn't work like that. In order to kill Critter X, you need the parts from Critter X. How does that work then? Well, it works like this. You go and struggle and grind and slog through to kill something to eventually get enough parts from that insect to make a weapon which makes it easier to kill that insect. But by the time you've done all that, you're kind of finished in that zone and you're ready to go off to the new one. You go to the new one and the stuff you've just got, the weapons you've upgraded and the armor you've built from killing Critter X, is not particularly useful in Zone Y against Critter Z. You just start the slog all over again. Classic example of this being the sandbox in the game. It's a desert biome. If you go there in the day, you'll roast to death. It's called sizzle damage, which is quite fun. So, how do you get armor that protects you against sizzle damage? You kill antlions and you can build a suit of antlion armor. Brilliant! Then we could survive in the sandbox. Where do antlions live? They live in the sandbox. Right, so I need to go into the sandbox, sizzling and burning away, killing antlions that live there with weapons that aren't particularly useful against them in order to get armor so that I can explore the sandbox. Yes, that's exactly how it works. Everything turns into a massive long slog that feels difficult and incredibly unrewarding and never any different. At no point do you get some armor and gear which you then think that is perfect for going killing the next hard zone. No, you go to the next hardest zone up. The critters are more dangerous, the environment is sometimes more dangerous, and you're using weapons and armor that aren't particularly useful there, and you have to grind out the bits that you need to get useful gear there from struggling to fight the things that live there. And because we're playing on medium difficulty, which isn't really medium at all in this game, but feels a lot harder, everything felt like a constant slog, which I think is why it took us so damn long, and why we always felt like we must be doing something wrong, we must be missing something, we must be in the wrong place. And so in conclusion, if you are determined to play Grounded, and it's not a terrible game by any means, but I would recommend to play it at mild difficulty. You can always bump the difficulty up on the fly as you play, that's not a problem. But the way we played it, going in at medium, the game was just far too much of a grind, and it wasn't very rewarding either. That's partly due to the very repetitive nature of combat, which never really changes from the beginning to the end of the game. So that was my experience, and hopefully they will make some patches or adjustments to the game, because I really want to like this. I love the game world and the setting and the sense of humour that the game has. There's loads of funny lines in it. But overall, the gameplay itself I found just too unrewarding. And you can go and check out that gameplay at the link down below over on my Let's Play channel, where I've uploaded all the footage from the live streams. Anyway, have I got this wrong? Are you a huge Grounded fan? If so, let me know in the comments down below and why you think that I've misjudged the game. I'd love to hear your opinions on this. And hope you've enjoyed the video, found it useful. Let me know either way, and I will catch you again on the next one.